Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels, God's favorite YouTube channel. And by the way, I recently checked. I prayed about it. And we're still God's favorite YouTube channel. I'm your host, Terry. Coming to you from Coachella, California, out here in the low desert. I'm at the Loves. Not much to report there. So it's been a minute since I did a video, and actually the last video I did, I hope this doesn't happen with this one, but the last one I did, it took like 3 days to upload. I don't know if it's where I was. I don't know if I need a better cell phone play. I don't know what it was, but it took a while to upload. And then I've been doing stuff, but nothing's been going like horribly wrong or anything. I just didn't feel like talking. And you know, sometimes I get in that mood where I don't want to listen to anything and I don't want to say anything. I mean, obviously I'm still talking to people and communicating, like typing, you know, commenting on stuff. So a lot of people ask about the video where I said, am I getting ripped off? And, you know, I made a lot of comments, like people were asking about methodology, like how do you figure out if you're getting what you're supposed to, etc. You know, and so if you're interested in some of the methodology, like how do you know you're getting the correct pay on the fuel surcharge? You know, I explained that, like how do I know I'm getting 72%? I explained that, although I also explained I didn't really care. If it's 72% or 27%, because that's not what I go by, right? I go by, what does this load pay? Does it make sense for me? Not, oh, let me make sure that they're not tricking me or whatever. By the way, though, I had a guy reach out to me. I guess he's been a contractor with Super Ego. And Super Ego is like part of this family of companies that's right now being sued for cheating their drivers. Now, the way they cheated their drivers is they said they were giving their drivers 88%, but what they were doing is, you know, and even at Prime, you get that like that paperwork backup to, you know, what people say. But at Super Ego, the numbers that were given to the company by the brokers, because I guess they use mostly brokered loads, those invoices, or I don't know what you want to call them, settlements, invoices, they were being altered by the company and then given to the drivers. And so they went out of their way to defraud people. And apparently there's this paper trail and they're trying to get a class certified, and somebody was asking me about that, and I could do a whole other show on class action lawsuits in this, you know, in federal court. But it's not for today. Yeah, so I just was like, I was up in Oregon. I took a load up to Oregon, got a load out of Oregon that I actually just got. I picked it up on Sunday morning, but I wasn't able to get it delivered until this morning in Riverside, California. What happened? So I was in Portland on Saturday. I got there early. I parked, went on a nice bike ride up the Columbia Gorge. You know, went to my favorite next to a truck stop Chinese restaurant in America, and they raised their prices a little bit, but still a good value. $10, I think it was $10.50 for the like Kung Pao chicken dinner special. So yeah, it was good. It's still a good deal. Nice folks there. A lot of truckers do eat in there. So, and then I left, I got that load up in Boardman, Oregon, and I ran down through Bend, Oregon, and I went down to Williams, and I wasn't in a big hurry. So when I was in Williams, I was like, oh, I'm going to go on a bike ride. Went on a bike ride. I'd gone about 10 miles. Like, I just started heading for the mountains. And if you know where Williams is, It's north of Sacramento, and I was at a Love's there. I just started heading west towards the mountains. And then I was like, I should turn, and I knew there was this local burrito place, Mexican place called Roberta's that had good reviews, and I was like, I'm gonna get something to eat there on the way back to the truck. So I turn, I get a flat tire, kind of like a pinch flat if you know anything about cycling. And I changed the tube out on the side of the road, and I could not get my pump to put sufficient air in the tire, sufficient pressure for me to ride it. So I ended up walking back to town. I did still stop at Roberta's because by then I needed to get off my feet because I was just wearing this old pair of Chucks, definitely not hiking shoes. And I ended up walking like 7.5 miles that day because then I walked to Roberta's, then I just kept going and walked all the way back to the truck. So I got a 10-mile ride in and like a 7.5-mile walk. Not what I intended. But thanks for asking. Yeah, my feet the blisters are pretty much gone. They've kind of absorbed back into my tissue, all the water. So anyway, that's what I did. That's how I got to California. But, so the day after Williams, I stopped in Tehachapi, and I was just splitting my sleeper, but then there was like this kind of sleet storm, very quick, but it made the roads like super treacherous. And yeah, so take a look at this real quick. This will show you how icy it was. This was just a parking lot. But the Caltrans closed California 58 through Tehachapi, and they also had closed the 5 up on the Grapevine, so that would have been the other way I would have gotten down into the LA basin. But take a look at this parking lot. So this is the snow, and then this is the pavement. I talked to these guys for a second. They just got off the road, but this is the pavement. Yeah, so it was treacherous. And when I woke up, I saw people like barely moving into the parking lot, and I was like, let me go get something to drink. You know, I went and got a soda, got a coffee, and by the time I got to the building, I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And I had a 2 a.m. delivery, so I just sent a message. They rescheduled it for 4 a.m. this morning, got that done. And my fleet manager was nice enough to be, you know, especially because I stopped because of the weather, because there were accidents and everything on the 58. I asked if I could put that trip on this week's settlement, and he said yeah, so I got that paperwork over to him. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about what you think about me. No, I'm just kidding. Let's talk about, and this is probably the last time I'm gonna do this because I'm not really a stock analyst for one company, but I wanted to just follow up, kind of close the loop on USXpress and talk about their Q4 and their entire 2022. They had their earnings call on February 9th. I read the entire transcript of that call, and I could tell you the lead here is that not one time is the word variant in that transcript. Not from the investor relations guy at USX, not from the CEO, Eric Fuller, not from the CFO, another guy named Eric, nowhere. Not in the analyst questions. Okay, variant is just, you know, it's packaging at this point. There is no, you know, anybody who tells you there's something called variant that's some kind of difference from USX, that's false. I mean, they still got their silver grayish trucks. I still see them. There's never going to be any variant trailers. They're just a failed experiment at this time. And in fact, all those nice, shiny, you know, some people had KWs because they were like the ambassadors, and the rest I mostly seemed like they're Freightliners. those trucks are just a monument to a failed experiment, trying to, like, I don't know what, the idea that they were going to invent something new when they weren't any good at their core competency. And I think the numbers bear this out. I mean, the call was full of, like, platitudes and corporate doublespeak again, but the numbers are still abysmal. So just to look at quarterly numbers and the annual numbers for this company. And by the way, here's my other disclaimer. I'm not saying they're not a good company to drive a truck for. Okay, this is not what I'm doing, because I don't know. Like, that's not my call. I have an opinion about the companies I've worked at, but I don't have an opinion about USX, whether it's good for you as a truck driver. So don't come at me and say, oh, I love this company. Fine, you love it, that's cool, but it doesn't mean that from a corporate standpoint they're a good company. It just means you like working there. Okay, so that I've said that before, but I want to be clear about that. But let's talk about the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. Okay, and in this space, now there were other trucking companies that had losing fourth quarters. Okay, Heartland Express, their takeover of some companies did not really accrete to earnings like they thought it would. Like, they took over CFI. So there were some other companies that had struggles. They like to call them headwinds. Okay, that's another, like, buzzy term that they like to use. We had some headwinds. It means we're losing money. Okay, but they don't want to say losing money because that sounds bad. But anyway, a lot of companies struggled in Q4. Okay, so that's not really huge news. LTL companies struggled. UPS has laid off a lot of junior drivers, right? Because they go by seniority, not by quality, because they're union. But let's get into these numbers with USX. And so their truckload division, which is now includes Variant, their truckload division OR, or operating ratio, for the quarter was 103. The closer it is to 100 on the downside, the worse it is. 103 actually means for every dollar of revenue they made, they spent $1.03 to make it. In other words, they have negative earnings. Okay, their consolidated OR, which includes their brokerage operations and whatever else they got going, maybe they're renting some space to other trucking companies, their consolidated OR was 101.2. So for every dollar that they made consolidated, all their entities, it cost them for every dollar they made, it cost them $1.01.2. Their OTR, average revenue per mile driven, for the quarter was $2.41.7. That is not good. And just to illustrate how not good that is, to have that be your average, I'm on a load right now that I'm going to be picking up tomorrow morning in Tempe, Arizona. It's going to Green Bay. My mileage, my CPM on this load, and just the loaded portion, because their number would not count deadheading, and well, I take it back. Their number would count their number probably would take into account deadhead miles, but without my deadhead, I'm at $2.49. With my deadhead, I'm probably around $2.40. That's after Prime takes its cut, right? That's after I'm giving up my, 28%. So, this is their average revenue. That's before they paid anybody, before they bought any fuel, bought any tires, anything. So their net loss on the quarter was $10.5 million. they spent in the quarter $6 million on interest. And this is something that kind of jumped out at me, and I'll go through some debt numbers here. So for 2022, they lost $38.8 million. So they spent more, 38.8 million more than they brought in as revenue. At the end of 2022, their net debt was $481.9 million. So basically $482 million of debt on their balance sheet. And just to give you an idea how concerning that is from a corporate standpoint, at the end of 21, their net debt was $252.2 million. So they've added about $130 million in debt in just the last year. That's a problem. And something that jumped out at me when I was looking at the transcript of the earnings call is that the CFO mentioned that they fund current operations with a combination of current revenue and a revolver. And for those of you who aren't familiar with banking and credit terms, a revolver does not mean a pistol, does not mean a wheel gun, doesn't mean a Smith & Wesson Model 29. What a revolver is kind of slang for a revolving line of credit. And so they are borrowing money basically on a weekly basis just to fund their daily operations. And that's where that $6 million in interest costs come in the quarter. You know, they're constantly borrowing money just to like pay, you know, keep the lights on, right? And that's kind of, I don't want to say that they're not the only company doing that, but it kind of starts to become a death, you know, like a death spiral. And when you've added $130 million in debt over the previous 12 months, I know it was a down year, right? But like, they've laid people off, they've cut in a lot of areas, they've sold property, and they're still carrying all this debt, right? And this is concerning because it's in a rising interest rate environment. The market was down big today because inflation is still at a high rate, and that's concerning, you know, stock traders and analysts because they think the Fed is going to raise interest rates again. Every time the Fed raises the prime interest rate, I guarantee it costs USX more to borrow money on that revolver because that revolver's interest rate is going to be pegged to, you know, any number. There are several interest rates that are important in the banking world. The prime is probably the most important. It's kind of a benchmark, but there's the discount rate, there's the margin rate, there's a lot of different rates, but I'm guessing they're pegged to the prime. And every time prime goes up, even by 25 basis points, right, 0.25%, it costs them more money just to fund their daily operations. The other thing that was really interesting to me is that they said 30% of their OTR revenue came from the spot market. And I've talked about this before. The spot market is inverted to the contract market. In other words, they don't have enough contracts, even though they're a huge carrier, they don't have enough contracts to keep all the trucks running that actually have drivers to drive them, right? And you know, when you can't keep, you know, when you're paying, and they were saying the spot market, they're looking at about $1 per mile less than their contract rate. Now, right now it's bid season, you know, a lot of contracts will be getting made, and they're saying, oh yeah, we're in good with our, you know, these national accounts, and we're gonna fix this, blah, 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 right? But again, quarter after quarter after quarter, they're like, yeah, we've turned a corner. Yeah, we've done all this heavy lifting, all this blocking and tackling. You know, everything's going to be great. And yet the numbers keep getting worse, right? And, you know, 30% on the spot market, you know, when that's, you know, what you're saying is we're going to have 30% of our revenue come from something that we know does not pay enough, right? Because there's no fuel surcharges. They mentioned that they don't get fuel surcharges on spot market stuff. So, you know, unless their sales department really turns things around and gets them to like 85 or 90% contract, they're going to continue to struggle even as the market starts to rebound. So, and another comment that Eric Fuller, the CEO, made, and it kind of bugged me because he was basically accusing like probably less sophisticated owner-operators and small companies of stuff that his company's doing too. And this is what he said. He said, well, we think these, you know, it's going to get better because a lot of these zombie trucking companies, like they're dead men walking, which I have called Variant before. These zombie companies are going to be going out of business, and they're going to be, you know, there's going to be so much more work because these zombie companies go out of business. But a lot of companies got to go out of business for a company as big as USX to really put a dent in that brokerage percentage of their OTR revenue. And one of the things that he said that really bugged me, and none of the analysts asked him about it. I would have if Tim Travels got to be on the call. Actually, I actually could have called in, I think, because they published the number. But he said these zombie companies are going to be gone because they're not cash flowing. That was the term he used. And I'm like, brah, you ain't cash flowing either, man. $6 million in interest in the quarter. You lost 10 million in the quarter. You ain't cash flowing either. You're cash flowing, it's just negative. So, like I said, this is going to be my last like commentary on USX. I've kind of done this as an exercise just to kind of show how you can look at any company, right? And how you can kind of cut through the BS that a lot of these CEOs put out there, and you know, and does USX survive? Yeah, probably. You know, I don't know. I mean, but here's what I do know. You know, it's probably going to be ugly for a while. And I think their stock is down like 60% in the past year or something like that. It's pretty bad. But if you're at this company and you like it, fine. Stay there. If you're happy with what you're making, stay there. But just know that you got to pay attention to the tea leaves, right? You got to pay attention to what you see. When they start cutting people, especially support staff, or like they lay people off in the shop or whatever it is, right? You got to look at that. When they say, oh, we used to run our trucks 400,000 miles before we turned them in, now we're going to run them 550. Those are all little things that taken by themselves, taken in isolation, they don't necessarily mean, you know, the sky is falling. But when you start seeing all these little tidbits of information and you start aggregating it, you're like, things aren't going that well, right? So, you know, keep that in mind. Now, I did have a guy that reached out to me that said he was making like $1.86, you know, at Variant as a company driver. And I basically said, that's bullshit, right? Show me the W-2. So he did send me a pay statement. Now, you know, I haven't verified this. I'm not gonna, right? I'll just take him at his word. He was making that kind of money at Variant, but here's the deal. And I apologize, I don't have his actual numbers, but it doesn't really matter. What he was making driving a truck was around 75 to 80 grand. Everything else came from referrals and that ambassador program at Variant, which, and bless his heart, right? Like, that's a shit ton of money, and, you know, more power to him. But it didn't come from driving a truck. It came from doing a lot of extra work. Now, he might say, oh, that's not a lot of extra work, but I'm here to tell you, no company is going to compensate you 100 grand for something if it doesn't involve some work. In other words, he was doing the job of an entire recruiter, I would guess. That's the first thing. The second thing is, given that they don't even mention Variant, like that's the plan we had, of which we will never speak again. I'm not sure if what he got this past year is going to be sustainable into next year. I don't know. I would be interested to find out if they're still going to honor those things. And I guess obviously the drivers would still have to be at Variant. But for every person that said, oh, I love this company, a lot of people have sent comments or whatever and said, you know, I'm losing my shirt here. They're not, you know, there's not enough work, whatever. We've talked, you know, my son and I talked, when my son Joe was on the truck, we talked to some people that were Variant drivers, said they constantly searching for trailers. So, you know, that's cool if you're searching for a trailer and they're paying you to drive around. But if that's not how you're compensated, then that's not that much fun. So anyway, like, comment, subscribe. We have passed 1,900 subscribers, so I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the comments and questions and stuff. And there are several people that have asked me to talk about different things that I'm gonna try to get to over the next few days. Somebody asked me about a SEP versus a simple IRA. I'm going to talk about that because you have until April 15th to set that up to make a 2022 contribution. So I'm going to talk about that as soon as I can. And, you know, maybe that helps people make decisions because they got some cash laying around or whatever. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.